Hi, everyone. Welcome to Act Now. I'm Julianna Forlano. It's great to be with you here today. On our program, we're going to be covering media rights and reproductive rights, two segments, two different things. Lots going on. Heidi Sieck, the co-founder and chief empowerment officer of Vote Pro-Choice, is going to be joining us to talk about the disasters happening on the Supreme Court and in Texas. We'll also have the headlines, and we'll also have a final word from me. So stay tuned. No matter where you're watching, please leave us a comment. We love listening to it, and please share this as it is live right now. And we want people to know that. Coming right up, the headlines. All right, activists are working to defend public broadcasting from severe cuts. As early as this week, the House will be voting on a proposal to defund your public media stations again. They have literally been trying this for decades. In 2019, Trump tried to actually eliminate PBS funding altogether and privatize the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. This seems especially grinchy given the role that PBS played during COVID. Did you know that after all the schools closed when COVID first hit, that the local public media stations turned on a dime to provide free learn from home services for kids in pre-K all the way to 12th grade in all 50 states? Now, why is this a big deal, you might ask? Well, 14% of households with school-age children do not have internet access. Many of those, most are lower income or live in rural areas. And when education moved online, alternatives were needed to close that digital divide for students not only without internet access, but there was a lot more without reliable internet connections. And PBS did that. Starting in Southern California, they devoted their entire daytime broadcast schedule to a new lineup of K through 12 educational program that was aligned with state curriculum. They organized it into different blocks based on grades and subject matter, and local stations around the country picked it up. And thanks to PBS, nearly every American household had access to critical educational content regardless of internet access. And of course, with that and the critical Downton Abbey reruns, PBS helped a nation cope. PBS is also gives local emergency alerts, which might be helpful, right now, given what's happening with the weather and the fascism out there. The House vote is likely to be any day now, and activists are encouraging people to call their House rep and to say no cuts to public broadcasting. Go ahead, call now. I can wait. Also in media activism, more than 50 U.S. groups are urging President Joe Biden to make haste and fill that open seat on the U.S. Federal Communication Commission, the FCC. This time, we would like a decent human being that has not been a lobbyist for telecom. We need this person so we can begin to reinstate those crucial net neutrality rules. Didn't we already win this, you might be asking? Well, yes, we did. After a decade-long battle, the FCC under Obama passed net neutrality rules using Title II. It gave internet users the strongest protections against the nefarious plans of Comcast and their ilk. But President Donald Mussolini's FCC repealed those rules, and here we are. The current FCC is deadlocked 2-2 between Republicans who want corporate fascism to run wild and free on the internet, and Democrats who so far have actively worked against that. Biden has not yet tapped a permanent chair for the U.S. telecom regulator, the American Civil Liberties Union, American Libraries Association, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, the Writers Guild West, and other groups, a lot of other groups, have said that Biden needs to work quickly to fill that open seat and allow the FCC to reinstate net neutrality rules. Now, let's remember, the open internet allows people who may not be represented properly by corporate media, say people of color. It gives these folks an opportunity to tell their own stories and organize for justice. When activists are able to turn out thousands of people in the streets at a moment's notice, it is because Comcast isn't allowed to block their messages or websites. The open internet allows people of color, immigrants, and other impacted communities to bypass traditional media gatekeepers. Without net neutralities, ISPs could block speech and prevent dissident voices from speaking freely online. And then where would we be? We know, Biden, you're very busy with the pandemic and all, but if you get a minute, fill a seat. In other news, over 1,000 coal miners, have you heard of this, in Brockwood, Alabama, have been striking for nearly 4 months in protest of the drastic cutbacks to wages and benefits that they have been living through. As if their job doesn't already cause drastic cuts in their life expectancy. 5 years, workers at Warrior Met coal mine saw their pay drastically slashed. They lost all their paid holidays. They lost some of their time off. They lost their ability to get overtime pay. They watched their health insurance costs go up, and safety standards and working conditions way worse than an Amazon warehouse. At the time, they accepted this contract because the company was going through bankruptcy. So they were being team players. But now Warrior Met's finances have improved significantly. They're making bank, they're making profits, and the company is refusing to share the wealth with the workers who sacrificed to save it. And now they're picketing, and guess what? Violence on the picket lines is escalating. We have some video here. Protesters are being injured when cars were rammed into the picket lines on 3 different occasions. These are peaceful protesters, and some of them have even been arrested on minuscule reasons. It's one of those things where the police and the company get together to try to squash the protest, like everywhere in history. Meanwhile, financial giant BlackRock Fund Advisors has made millions from the sweat and blood of these laborers and their families. Yet they continue to refuse to recognize that labor and the sacrifices that made those billions possible should be remunerated. So earlier today, by the way, on the anniversary today of the 1963 March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, a group of Warrior Met strikers, along with fellow mine workers from Alabama, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Ohio, went to New York City to take their demands to Warrior Met's largest shareholder, BlackRock Fund Advisors. Act.tv is providing live coverage of that protest, and we are going to be covering that coverage with our show on Friday. So if you haven't already subscribed to this, wherever you're watching, you definitely want to do that. Stay tuned. Our interview with Heidi Sieck is next. Welcome back, everybody. It has been a stressful time for people working to protect women's bodily autonomy. Reproductive rights are under attack in states across the country, as well as in the highest court in the land. Here to talk about the dire situation is Heidi Sieck, co-founder, chief empowerment officer of Vote Pro-Choice, a national political engagement platform connecting pro-choice voters with pro-choice champions in critical elections. We need those champions. Heidi, thank you so much for joining us on the program today.
Thank you, Juliana. Happy to be here. Not necessarily happy to be talking about what we're talking about, but thank you for letting us have this conversation.
Yeah, no, it's so important. Let's start by talking about the pending disaster in the Supreme Court. Can you bring us up to date?
Oh, yes, there is a disaster. First of all, though, I want to start our conversation by saying to all of your listeners that and your audience out there that sometimes when you hear the words reproductive rights or abortion, you might think it doesn't apply to you. Oh, that's a woman's issue. That's a red state issue. I want to assure each and every one of you out there that where we are at with regard to reproductive freedom in the United States of America is an everyone issue. We are talking about some fundamental issues of liberty and freedom and bodily autonomy that will affect absolutely everyone. People who identify as men, young people, people who are no longer planning families. This is for you. So I truly invite you to listen with an open mind and open ears about what is actually happening in your country and get involved if you haven't already. So first of all, Roe v. Wade was a Supreme Court decision decided in 1973 that does protect abortion constitutionally up to about 24 weeks. And over the course of the last 50 years, states have constantly been trying to limit access to abortion and reproductive health through state legislation. And these have come in terms of restricted laws that make it more difficult to access abortion. And now recently, particularly when Trump was elected, it's turned into a free-for-all of unconstitutional abortion bans. So what happened, where we are at right now, is that the Supreme Court has decided to take up a case called Mississippi Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health. It's in Mississippi. It's Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization. And it was a 15-week unconstitutional abortion ban passed by the Mississippi state legislature and signed into law by the governor. It was immediately appealed to the court system and struck down by the Fifth Circuit. Now, what that means is when it's struck down by a circuit court, it goes to the Supreme Court to consider whether they wanted to think about it or not. Now, for the last couple of years, there have been around 20 cases that have been kind of sitting on the sidelines of the Supreme Court, waiting to see if they're going to talk about abortion access or bans or anything like that. We've all been waiting to see if they're going to take one up. Now, this particular one was considered by the Supreme Court 17 times over the last year. And in May, the Supreme Court decided that they were going to hear this case. And what's scary about it is there's no reason to hear this case except to directly consider the overturn of Roe v. Wade. Because the question that they asked in this case is whether all pre-viability prohibitions on elective abortion is unconstitutional. That's a very, very broad question, and basically is allowing this Supreme Court, which is 6 conservatives, 3 sane, rational people, that they are going to actually decide whether they want to overturn Roe. So that's what's going to happen. Now, there's 2 things I want to let the audience know, is that last Thursday, the Mississippi Attorney General filed a brief talking about their position on this case. And they said publicly what the anti-choice movement has never truly said, but now we have it written down, that their entire intent for this is to overturn Roe v. Wade and all the other Supreme Court cases that are protecting abortion rights. It was specifically written in this filing. So this is the whole play, this is the goal, and that's what's going to happen. Now, additional filings, amicus court briefs, and those sorts of things are going to be happening in September. The oral arguments will be the 1st or 2nd week of November, and the decision, which means they will have to make a decision on this, will come down by next June. So this is really happening. I'm happy to talk more about the details of this, but I'm open to more questions.
No, this is really important. And do you think the American public, not just activists like our audience and people that we may come in contact with, do you think the public knows that this is happening?
I think that they have a sense that something's happening. There's been a lot of press coverage, but folks may not really understand how it truly impacts everybody. So what this means is when Roe v. Wade gets overturned in June, that the states will have a decision about the way that they regulate abortion, reproductive health, reproductive freedom. And I think for over the last 40, 50 years, so much of the restrictions that have been happening in this country have been happening kind of in a small way in the state legislatures where people aren't necessarily paying attention because there's not as much media. It's just like you were saying in your headlines, there's an onslaught, there's a problem with like local media and independent media that's covering a lot of the local and state legislation and our elected officials at that level. So much has happened that the public isn't aware of or hasn't seen the bigger picture of, because I will tell you, over the last 30, 40 years, hundreds, thousands of pieces of legislation have been passed into law that are restricting access to abortion. In fact, this year, as of July 1st, this has been the worst legislative year in all the history of abortion rights. 90 abortion restrictions have been enacted, meaning passed by state legislatures and signed into law by governors. which is more than any other year, and we're only at July. So do folks know that that's happening? No, I don't think that they see, or they're seeing the bigger picture. So that's why it's really important for us to have these conversations here.
Well, we're really happy that you're here with us. Given the lineup of the Supreme Court, as you said, 6-4, is there any chance that the vote might not overturn Roe v. Wade?
Well, here's the thing. The issue here is the concept of precedent, which is the foundation, the core of the Supreme Court itself, meaning their role is a check and balance on the other branches of the federal government. The legislative branch, which we know has got challenges, the executive branch, which is the president, and the executive office is the president, and administrative law. So their job is to check those laws and regulations, and to really be like a sober, nonpartisan, reflective.
Yeah, that's not happening.
Constitutional body. That's not happening. And now this is the big question. Precedent is underneath all of it, which means that the Supreme Court, once they have decided a law, won't decide it again unless something drastic has changed. And this is the kicker here, because what has changed in the United States of America is that support for reproductive freedom has only grown. Over 80% of this country, no matter their religious or political affiliation, don't want Roe v. Wade overturned. They want access to abortion in some or all cases. There is a vast, huge support for access to reproductive health, reproductive freedom, and abortion services. That is what is continually changing. However, there is some indication. That's why we're so concerned that the Supreme Court is taking this up, because there is no reason to, from a social political perspective, to overturn this precedent. Now, John Roberts is very rooted in precedent. We are very hopeful, and he has written other decisions and spoken about how we believe that he is certainly a person that could potentially stand on precedent with regard to this decision. Now, this is the ultimate head scratcher, quandary, irony, perhaps, is that the potential other Supreme Court justice that could be reflective of precedent is Brett Kavanaugh. So he was the one that we protested inordinately, and I stand by that month I spent in DC and that time I spent in jail in protest of that appointment. But there is a universe where these two men may decide that precedent is more important than controlling people's bodies and their decisions.
If we start seeing the Supreme Court defying precedent here, wouldn't it open a door to relitigate every law that we have?
Yes. That is, yes, absolutely correct.
That's
but
a problem.
There's some there are some past decisions that have happened in the last year with Brett Kavanaugh and John Roberts on the Supreme Court where they have overturned some precedent on some other technical cases that had to do with like sovereign immunity or something like that. So they know how to, they're willing to do this. So
I don't necessarily mean to drag you into politics, but there's always a political motive and behind pretty much everything, it seems, these days. And the anti-choice movement, or the issue, has been red meat for drumming up support of working people to the right wing, where their economic interests are not being looked out for. Many of their other interests, their health care, poisoning the environment, none of that is being looked out for. And they have managed to use this as a wedge issue to expand their base. If the Supreme Court overturns it, it just doesn't seem like a smart political move for the right. And I don't believe at this point the Supreme Court is above politics.
That's right. If the Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade, all of this goes to the state. However, you make a very important point. This has always and forever, since the 80s, when this infrastructure, this anti-choice minority infrastructure, was really put in place, It's all just about political power. So this is a leverage of a small group of people. It's around 18% of the voting
Populace.
minority that is truly anti-choice, that believes that government should control people's bodies, that should be legislating reproductive health decisions. There's 18%, but the Republican Party and the conservative movement need that 18% to stay with them in order to win elections. And it's now even more important. So particularly at the state level where all of this is going on and where congressional lines get drawn for congressional districts and governors are really seeking power in their states. This is an important issue to keep a certain amount of voters on the side of the movement, because here we just have to remind you, 7 in 10, nearly 8 in 10 American people do not want Roe v. Wade overturned. And we all know we have that experience of wanting our own body autonomy and independence when we have to make personal decisions about our family and our medical care. When we're sitting in that hospital or the doctor's office, do you want a sheriff's deputy or a police officer standing there with you if you had a miscarriage, or if you have to decide what to do with a very dire situation with a pregnancy that may have a fetal anomaly? Is that what we want? And so that is what the fundamental question that we're facing right now.
Heidi, let's turn to Texas, where lawmakers are striving to pass a law that is almost unthinkable. We don't want Roe v. Wade overturned, but we also don't want our brethren in, what is it, the Lone Star State to have this kind of thing happen to them. Talk about what they're doing.
Yeah, which is directly related to what I was saying before. This is a fundamental perspective issue. Again, over the last 40 years, hundreds of laws have been passed, thousands have been introduced that continue to restrict abortion. The conservative movement has an amazing infrastructure of templated legislation that try out all sorts of things. When I was working in the unicameral in Nebraska, in the 90s, that's when it all started. They were just testing out all kinds of different things. Here's a new one that is just unbelievable to me. So Texas, 2021, in May, Governor Greg Abbott, a 2-term governor who's going for re-election again in 2022, signed into law a 6-week abortion ban, unconstitutional currently, which would take effect in September. This would ban abortion before people even know that they're pregnant. 6 weeks, sometimes you don't even know.
No, you don't know.
No, you don't know. You have no idea.
No.
But that's kind of typical to some of these abortion bans across the board. That'll get repealed, it'll go to the Supreme Court, etc. What is absurd, egregious, terrifying about this new law is that they're trying new ways of enforcement. This law would deputize ordinary citizens, including people from outside of Texas, who can sue a clinic or anyone helping someone obtain an abortion after 6 weeks, and it will award that person up to $10,000 per illegal abortion. We are talking deputizing vigilantes to turn in people who are accessing abortion after 6 weeks or providing abortion after 6 weeks. So if I am driving a friend to a clinic, I could be sued by anyone who knows that I'm driving to that clinic. This is what's going on in Texas. This was a law signed into law by the governor of Texas.
How is this possible? I mean, how is this even legal? Is there a legal balance? I mean, they're passing laws that are illegal anyway, or unconstitutional at least. How are they doing this?
Absurd. So this is how they are doing it, is because they have a majority in the Texas state legislature and a anti-choice governor. Wow. So we'll talk about that in a minute. So of course we have to sue. So on July 13th, the Center for Reproductive Rights, Planned Parenthood, the ACLU, Texas abortion providers, abortion funds, doctors, everybody sued in the district court. But because of the structure of this particular law, they had to sue every single state court trial judge, every county clerk, the Texas Medical Board, the Board of Nursing, the Board of Pharmacy, the Attorney General. They had to sue every judge in Texas, basically, in order to to make sure that this is properly addressed in district and circuit court.
Wow.
So this one is like, this is where you really see what the perspective is of this overly funded anti-choice minority that has outsized power in a pro-choice nation.
I mean,
Really,
just
truly
the society that would come.
vigilantes and law enforcement to be monitoring the pregnancies of people and miscarriages of people, that it's codified in law, and that is what is happening. So
that is just horrifying, as someone who just had a baby not less than a decade ago. That still is right in, it sears in your memory, that particular moment. That it's just unthinkable, and it turns people against each other. I mean, we're talking about like people turning against Nazi. It's very Nazi-ish.
Yes, it's extreme. It's extreme.
Unbelievable.
But this has always been, now the unspoken becomes spoken. Now we know from the Attorney General in Mississippi that the whole point was to overturn Roe v. Wade. Now we know from these laws that the whole point was to control people's bodies, to turn people against each other, to have law enforcement. Actually, the whole point was to overturn Roe v. Wade. Now we know from these laws that the whole point was to control people's bodies, to turn people against each other, to have law enforcement actually involved in reproductive health decisions. It's not how we know.
Heidi, thank you so much for joining us on the program. I really appreciate it. What can activists and allies do? What are they doing? I'm sure everyone's working on this already, but what can allies do?
That's why I founded Vote Pro-Choice, is so we can look at all the down ballot races and really look at the lens of reproductive freedom, and be able to vote pro-choice in every election. So pay close attention to your state and local elections. There are 45,000 of them happening in 2021 in almost every state. So get involved. Please, please, please. VoteProChoice.us will provide you all the information that you need to vote pro-choice in every one of those elections. Secondly, obviously, we really need to be looking at those gubernatorial races in 2022. We can't give Texas Governor Greg Abbott a third term. So support a Texas gubernatorial election seriously. That is going to be very important. I think also, of course, there's going to be a lot of activity at the Supreme Court. If you really want to get involved that way, there's going to be protests and actions there. So that's a good way to just be part of the community if you want. But in the end, it really is local and state elections. Vote pro-choice in every election. Get involved, get informed, and we've created the platforms for you to do that.
Well, we thank you very, very much for doing that. Don't forget to go. You can follow the hashtag Vote Pro Choice on Twitter. Heidi Sieck, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad we were able to cover this.
Me too. Me too. And I hope you'll come back as things unfold, hopefully in the right direction.
I certainly hope so. Thank you, Juliana.
You're watching Act TV. Don't forget to follow us across platforms. Stay tuned for a final word. Earlier in this show, we talked about how the House will be voting on a proposal to defund PBS. Although PBS does take private donations, according to the CEO of PBS, the elimination of federal funding to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting would at first devastate and then ultimately destroy the public media's ability to provide early childhood content, life-saving emergency alerts, the public affairs programs, and Nova. We don't want to lose Nova. But Republicans really want to do this. They've been trying to do this for decades, almost half a century, actually. But why? Why strangle Daniel Tiger in a bathtub? Why take away funding for Finding Your Roots? Why can't we watch British crime dramas in peace? Why? Is it just greed? Perhaps the Republican austerity-loving defunders are just greedy hoarders who won't stop until all public money is funneled only towards subsidizing the merchants of death, as I like to put it. The oil industry, they're still getting a subsidy. Or maybe PBS NewsHour is cutting into Big Pharma's profits for sleep aids. Kidding, but it can be very dry. It really can put you to sleep. But dry news is what happens when you remove the propaganda, fear-mongering, and excitatory graphics from a news broadcast. A 2018 Vanity Fair article on just this topic of why Republicans are itching to defund PBS said the most likely reason, beyond pure greed, is that Republicans want to slash the public broadcasting budget because it is the perfect target for the right, combining two of the GOP's favorite punching bags, the media and government spending. I said earlier that in 2019, Trump not only sought to cut their budget, but to eliminate the funding altogether and privatize the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. In 1969, that's like almost a half a century ago, Mr. Rogers testified in front of Congress when Nixon was trying to permanently retire him to the land of make-believe. The video made the rounds on YouTube recently. Here's a clip.
I'm very much concerned, as I know you are, about what's being delivered to our children in this country. And I've worked in the field of child development for 6 years now, trying to understand the inner needs of children. We deal with such things as the inner drama of childhood. We don't have to bop somebody over the head to make him to make drama on the screen. We deal with such things as getting a haircut, or the feelings about brothers and sisters, and the kind of anger that arises in simple family situations. And we speak to it constructively.
How long a program is it?
It's a half hour every day. This is what I give. I give an expression of care every day to each child to help him realize that he is unique. I end the program by saying, you've made this day a special day by just your being you. There's no person in the whole world like you, and I like you just the way you are. And I feel that if we in public television can only make it clear that feelings are mentionable and manageable, we will have done a great service for mental health. I think that it's much more dramatic that two men could be working out their feelings of anger, much more dramatic than showing something of gunfire. I'm constantly concerned about what our children are seeing. And for 15 years, I have tried in this country and Canada to present what I feel is a meaningful expression of care.
Do you narrate it?
I'm the host, yes. And I do all the puppets, and I write all the music, and I write all the scripts.
Well, I'm supposed to be a pretty tough guy, and this is the first time I've had goosebumps for the last 2 days.
Well, I'm grateful not only for your goosebumps, but for your interest in our kind of communication. Could I tell you the words of one of the songs which I feel is very important?
Yes.
This has to do with that good feeling of control, which I feel that children need to know is there. And it starts out, what do you do with the mad that you feel? And that first line came straight from a child. I work with children, doing puppets in very personal communication with small groups. What do you do with the mad that you feel? When you feel so mad you could bite. When the whole wide world seems oh so wrong, and nothing you do seems very right. What do you do? Do you punch a bag? Do you pound some clay or some dough? Do you round up friends for a game of tag or see how fast you go? It's great to be able to stop when you've planned a thing that's wrong and be able to do something else instead and think this song. I can stop when I want to. can stop when I wish, can stop, anytime. And what a good feeling to feel like this and know that the feeling is really mine. Know that there's something deep inside that helps us become what we can. For a girl can be someday a lady, and a boy can be someday a man.
I think it's wonderful. I think it's wonderful. Looks like you just earned the $20 million.
Phil. Yes, yes, yes. He got the money that time, but it's been a fight in every Republican administration since. Why? Is it pure greed? No, it's more than that. There is a concerted effort to kill all goods, all public goods, in the United States. Libraries, post offices, public education, public health care, all of it. And to privatize these entities in the profit of a few at the expense of a many. But it's more than even that. It's more than just that. I believe there's also a concerted effort to wipe out any experience of common good, any memory of it, any image of it. Corporate forces don't want us to know that another world is possible, and it doesn't take long to forget. Remember what life was like without a cell phone? No, you probably don't. And your kids certainly don't, because they never knew it. So it will be that way with institutions for the collective good. If there are no examples of shared resources, as time passes, people will have no models. It'll fall out of our consciousness and out of our culture. It will further us into the mental illness, narcissism, and sociopathy cultivated by capitalism and libertarianism. That's right. I said libertarianism. You can yell at me in the comments. Regular TV gives us many examples of where this has already happened. Hellscape societies where fear, paranoia, selfishness, amorality, and debasement abound. PBS gives us Call the Midwives, a show not only about socialized healthcare, but about women, birth, children, relationships, and connection. And people watch it. A lot of people. There are 0 zombie apocalypse shows on WNET. 0. Cuts to PBS are one of the 1,000 cuts by which corporatists seek to crush any remnant of New Deal policies, any shred of the natural instinct toward mutual caring and the brotherhood of man, and the sisterhood, too. They want to extinguish it. I don't think we should let them. I'm Julianna Forlano. You're watching ACT Now. Follow us across platforms on act.tv, and do call your congressperson and encourage them not to defund public media. Thanks for watching. We'll see you Friday.